Well, Danny the Digger, welcome back to the Watchman Show, my friend.
Always a pleasure to be with you.
It just keeps getting better and better every time the Digger is with us here on the Watchman. And hey, today we are at one of the most significant archaeological sites in all of Israel. Danny, this is Bet Shan, a stunning view here from the mountaintop. Tell us where we are right now and why it's so important.
Well, we are on the top of the Acropolis, on top of the citadel of the city from Roman times, Romans and Byzantine times. But this was the city in the days of the Old Testament periods. And this is quite a significant place indeed. First of all, we're in the heart of the northern part of Israel, at the eastern end of the Jezreel Valley. The Jordan Valley is behind us. This city sits on a major junction of trade routes. You've got abundance of water going down through the stream of Harod beneath you, springs erupting at the foothills of the Gilboa Mountains, land that could be cultivated here. In fact, I grew up in this area working in the cotton fields.
Yeah, you grew up in a kibbutz not far from here.
Just 7 kilometers away. My childhood was also operating the irrigation system of the cotton fields from the water.
Your old stomping grounds here.
Yes, also.
Yeah.
And the hill gives you protection. This place is ideal for human inhabitation in ancient times.
And the inhabitation goes back, what, 6,000 years perhaps?
From Chalcolithic age, one of those prehistorical periods. But the main period of interest here from a biblical point of view is the time of the last period of the Canaanites.
Yeah.
And the days of the Philistines fighting the Israelites.
Now, Danny, this is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world, up there with Jericho, Damascus, and Jerusalem.
Jerusalem, yes. It's really an exception because it always gave those benefits of protection, of water, of land to cultivate, and the trade routes.
It's got it all, and the Egyptians saw that. For a time, the Egyptians controlled this area, then the Canaanites.
Yeah.
And then the Philistines, the arch enemy of the Israelites.
Yes, this is a period, the 12th century is the time that the Canaanites are declining, and the New World Order is different other ethnic groups, the Giladites, the Moabites, the Ammonites. And here we hear of the Philistines. The Philistines who really mastered the southern coastal plain, even have some influence over here, have some military presence. And Saul and the Israelites being formed on the mountains are confronting them.
This is very interesting, Danny, because the Philistines were in what today is called the Gaza area and Ashkelon, Ashdod, like you said, the coast. But they were growing so strong that they made their way here to Bet Shan, which is a ways from that area.
A pretty long distance.
Yeah.
It looks like they had an interest to try to connect to Mesopotamia, or at least to the trade routes to Damascus and Mesopotamia.
And we're not that far from Galilee, by the way, either.
It's just around the corner.
Yeah, it's a short drive to the Sea of Galilee.
Yes, and the Israelites are formed mostly in the mountains of Judea and Samaria, so they are afraid of them. And Saul is trying to confront them, but he knows that in the Jezreel Valley, the Philistines had an advantage of the chariots. So he tries to trap them up to the mountains. And Mount Gilboa, here behind us, will play a major role, the place of the battle.
We know it from the Bible very well.
He manages to trap them to go up the mountains, and still they are victorious.
The Philistines are victorious.
Let's read the text, okay? In the first book of Samuel, at the very end of it, it tells us the following. That the Philistines fought against Israel, and the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines and fell slain on Mount Gilboa. Then the Philistines followed hard after Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan, Avinadav, and Malchishua, Saul's sons. So Saul is trying to trap the Philistines into an area where they will lose their advantage of using their chariots. Up in the mountains, it's much harder to fight with a chariot. And although he manages to lead them into a battle on the Gilboa, he still loses.
And the Philistines, again, were the Israelites' arch enemy, Danny. I mean, this was a long-running feud between the Israelites and the Philistines, and you could see why Bet Shan was so strategic for the Philistines to hold and possess. This was an area where they could make further incursions into Israel and attack the Israelites from.
Definitely, definitely. And the loss, even on the mountains, was a big defeat, so much that Saul wanted to kill himself. He asked his armor bearer to kill him. He refused, so Saul falls on his sword. And the following day, the Philistines go through the bodies of the battle and they find the body of Saul and his sons.
So Saul's killed, his 3 sons are killed, including Jonathan, who was David's best friend.
Indeed. And they chop his head off and they hang his headless body on the walls of Bet Shean. Right here where we
Right here where we're standing. This is where King Saul was hung by his fierce enemy, hated enemy, the Philistines. His headless corpse, right here.
But don't try to look for it, because the following sentence tells us of the friends of the Israelites, the Giladites, who come and take the body off and burn it and bury it in a proper way in the Gilad. So the remains of Saul are somewhere over there on the other side of the Jordan Valley.
Again, not far from where we're standing, Danny. And the Philistines, again, Saul ran himself through. The Bible says he ultimately killed himself. He was mortally wounded, but he couldn't stand the shame of being killed by the uncircumcised enemy, the Philistines. But I would think that the Philistines hung that headless body here of King Saul as a sign of intimidation, psychological warfare, I guess, against the Israelites.
Public humiliation. Here's what's left of your king, indeed. Now the question is, can archaeology actually track those walls? The body isn't here, but the walls, maybe archaeology could find evidence of that. And that's exactly what brought an American university here in the 1920s. They started peeling the top of the mountain here.
This is the University of Pennsylvania.
Of Pennsylvania. In the 1980s and 90s, a team from the Hebrew University worked here as well. They made very interesting discoveries. The walls themselves are still kind of hiding somewhere around here. We haven't found clear evidence of it, but maybe a third expedition will find those remains. But this is the site.
So a tragic ending for King Saul. You know, Danny, his career began with such promise. He was anointed the first king of Israel. The Bible tells us he went down a wrong path, did King Saul, and it ended in disaster. But the Philistines held this area. Saul was disgraced, killed himself, hung. But King David avenged that. And tell us more about that. He came to Bet Shean later on.
He was in a way a political opposition to Saul.
Of course, Saul tried to kill him. Was insanely jealous of David.
But once Saul is dead, David makes a beautiful lamentation. We read some of this lamentation to this day in Israeli military cemeteries. The beauty of Israel is slain on your high places. How the mighty have fallen. Tell it not in Gath, proclaim it not in the streets of Ashkelon. Lest the daughters of the Philistines rejoice, lest the daughters of the uncircumcised triumph. And then he curses also the mountain for what it encountered. O mountains of Gilboa, let there be no dew, no rain upon you, nor fields of offerings. Look, the mountains of Gilboa are pretty barren.
It looks pretty barren today. So God heard King David's prayers, soon to be King David, we should say. He was not king at the time he wrote that, but when he did become king, Danny, he came back here to Bet Shean, took on the Philistines, and avenged King Saul and his best friend Jonathan's death. Tell us a little bit more about that.
He eventually created the united monarchy. He unites all of the tribes under his control. He creates Jerusalem now as the new capital of the united monarchy, the administrative and the religious center.
And Bet Shean was part of that kingdom, the United Kingdom of Israel.
Totally.
So David did get his revenge. The Philistines were defeated and eventually pushed out of here.
Yeah. And some 200 years later, the Assyrians completely wiped them out and the whole Philistine culture disappeared. Okay, no one
I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you. No one cursed the Israelites more than the Philistines, and they're gone from the pages of history today. So Danny, from a biblical perspective, this site is obviously famous for the death of King Saul, his body hanged again from the walls of Bet Shean, but a really rich New Testament history here as well, and really I would say probably was thriving during that period more than any other time.
Totally. Just look beneath you here in the valley, what a big Roman Byzantine city has been exposed, and some of it is the city where Jesus walked.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. This is fun because these are some of the most famous, I'd say, Roman ruins in the world. A stunning archaeological find here, an excavation, and we're going to be able to walk through them right now and talk a little New Testament. Danny, lead the way.